Why is our culture trying to glorify sexless marriages? What is the purpose of encouraging sexless marriages? Today, we're going to talk about a viral New York Times article that is entitled, "Can a Sexless Marriage Be a Happy One?" Experts and couples are challenging the conventional wisdom that sex is essential to relationships. This was published on, what day was this published on? April 18th. So about a month ago now. People have been talking about it online for a little while. I find just, at first when I saw this headline, I thought it was parody because somebody shared it on Twitter. And I thought to myself, I was like, oh, that's not real. And it turned out to be very, very real. Of course, there's a paywall to access this article. And I usually have a paywall remover, but it didn't work for this one. So we're going to talk about this article today. And we're going to talk about also some practical tips for keeping intimacy alive in marriage, because intimacy is important in marriage, of course, especially for people who are like young and vibrant, should be young and vibrant. Yeah, intimacy is important in marriage. So let's go to some excerpts from this article that was shared as screenshots on Twitter. There is this Twitter account called Med Gold, and he shared a couple of screenshots. His tweet was, "The New York Times is trying to normalize a sexless society and celebrates femceldom as empowering." So here is what the headline looks like. As I said, "Can a sexless marriage be a happy one?" This is part of the modern love issue from the New York Times. Yes, so very modern, so forward-thinking, sexless marriage. Here's what the first excerpt is. I'm going to read it to you for those of you who are just listening to the audio. "Michelle and John share a one-bedroom with their daughter, and while they get some privacy during the day, they're busy working from home. Now, most days, Michelle masturbates in the morning while John takes their daughter to preschool. He masturbates at night in the bathroom while watching porn on his phone. For John, it's merely a physical release, but for Michelle, pleasuring herself serves a different purpose. She is trying to figure out what makes her feel good. Exploring her changed body alone eliminates the guilt she has when she can't climax with her husband. She doesn't want him to think it has anything to do with him. I want to get there, but it's not getting there," she says. So here's another excerpt from later in the article. "Many younger women, for instance, shaped in part by the Me Too movement, are engaging in intentional abstinence. There are trends on TikTok about going boy sober, a word coined by the comedian Hope Woodard. She says that taking a break from sex can be empowering for women who previously altered their desires to accommodate men. The digital feminist 4B movement, which originated in South Korea but has spread globally through social media, advocates a rejection of childbearing as well as heterosexual dating, marriage, and sex. Platonic life partners," in quotes. Meanwhile, friends who commit to owning a home and even raising children together insist that sex and romance are not necessary to lifelong unions. And then there's just some more in here. The last screenshot talks about a study found that American adults born in the 1990s are having less sex than older generations. We know this already. The 2021 General Social Survey found that about 50% of all adults polled had sex once a month or less, with half of those people reporting they hadn't had sex for a year. Wow. Okay, so let's talk about this. This is happening. They're trying to make sexless marriages sound normal, and they're trying to make because it's incels. The word incel, that's involuntarily celibate. That's the term that's applied to men. But now there's femcels, like women who are celibate, intentionally celibate. Anyway, the writer of this article from the New York Times argues that the understanding of sex within marriage has undergone profound changes. So she says that there was a shift from a focus primarily on procreation to being viewed as a crucial element of marital happiness. And then she talks about the sex positivity movement that gained traction in the 1990s alongside emerging therapeutic practices like couples counseling. And there was a heightened emphasis on the importance of regular social interaction between a man and a woman, between a husband and a wife, right? However, this writer says that there's been a significant reevaluation of these established norms. So she essentially writes about how there are a lot of couples and therapists who are challenging the idea that you need sex in a marriage, and that you actually, they're saying that you actually don't need it. So there's a woman named Sharon Hyman. She's a leader of an online group named A Partners, which I'm assuming stands for like asexual. She supports couples living separately. And she observes that members often report improvements in their sexual relationships if they spend a lot of time apart. So she advocates for diverse relationship models and saying that there's no universal formula that suits all couples. So this is said to be an evolving perspective. And then you have the likes of Esther Perel, that psychotherapist who talks about boredom in the bedroom. And she says that a lot of couples are not having sex because they're bored with one another. And she, not that she supports cheating, but she talks about how infidelity can actually be like very invigorating for a relationship, and it can be like very sexy. She has a podcast called Where Should We Begin? And she talks to couples who are navigating their sexual desires and fantasies. And she talks a lot about infidelity. So you see here, there's a growing resistance to the traditional emphasis on sexual frequency within marriage. And yeah, this is certainly a problem, right? But before we get into that, I want to tell you about the Shift, my women's group. We have enrollment open. Click the link in the description in the show notes to join us, because we have a really great May challenge that's focusing on healthy hormones, boosting progesterone naturally, which is your key mood and sleep stabilizer. Very important hormone, women, for your healthy menstrual cycle, for fertility, for getting pregnant, for staying pregnant. And for those of you who are perimenopausal or menopausal, it's really important to find natural ways to boost progesterone, because your body is naturally declining its production of progesterone. We also have a ton of webinars and exclusive live streams and interviews with experts over in the group about a variety of topics, about everything from hormones to weight loss to non-toxic living. We do weekly workouts, weekly recipes. We got weight loss programs in there. We've got a ton of stuff happening with, at this point, almost 1,000 women all supporting each other on their journeys. Many women are trying to lose weight, doing it successfully. So some women are just trying to heal after birth, postpartum. Some are just there to balance their hormones or to learn how to cook more for their families. It's just a really, really great place to be for women who want an online community that are supporting their goals, their health and fitness goals. Okay, back to this discussion, the sexual frequency within marriages, okay? So there is definitely a general decline in sexual activity across a lot of different demographics in the US, especially with younger generations. I forgot the exact age group, but it's, I think, men in their 20s. We recently found out last year or the year before that 1/3 of them are not having sex, which is the highest percentage of celibacy compared to previous generations. You have a lot of these young people who are just not really having sex anymore. And this has, I think this has to do with a lot of different things. You can attribute this to corn. You know what I'm talking about? Corn, the rampant availability of corn, and so many men and women too, but men more so, are addicted to corn. Hookup culture also, which sounds counterintuitive because you're told that guys who are single and participate in hookup culture, they have way more sex than married guys. Yeah, that's actually not true. The data has shown for years that married couples actually have more sex than single people who are just dating. And then you also have the element of living chronically online. Both men and women are seeing friends in person much less than previous generations, even down to high schoolers. There are high statistics of high schoolers who barely see their friends in person. They're just constantly online. There are a lot of factors that play into this statistic of young men and women just having a lot less sex than they have in the previous generations. And then, of course, getting married much later in life, when people used to get married in their early to mid 20s, which means they were having sex more often. So I want to talk a little bit about the 4B movement. which I briefly touched on when reading the excerpt from the New York Times article. The 4B movement, again, comes from South Korea. It's a social phenomenon that represents a sort of radical shift in traditional views of women's roles in society. And it's interesting because South Korea has some of the lowest birth replacement rates in the world right now. And movements like this are not helping whatsoever. So the 4B stands for B, which is no childbirth, Bon, no marriage, Boo, no dating, and Boo, no sex. This movement emerged as kind of a response to so-called rigid gender roles. And in the mid-2010s is when this movement really took off. And women are saying that they're participating in this movement to shed light on systemic inequality and gender-based violence and the overwhelming demands of trying to balance career and family life. And it's part of course, it's part of feminist activism. And younger generations are becoming much more vocal about women's roles in society. So this includes the expectation to get married and have children. And they want to reject these roles. They want to reject marriage, childbearing, motherhood in order to pursue their own interests and their own desires. And they frame it as a way to focus on self-empowerment and independence and personal growth. But what's really going to happen is that the South Korean race anyway, I mean, I don't think that the North Korea's birth replacement rates are that high either, but your ethnicity is going to die out, man. Like fewer and fewer people are procreating. It's, if you keep rejecting marriage and sex and kids, like you're just going to cease to exist. Social media has obviously played a crucial role. You actually see a lot of TikToks now. Just go on TikTok and type in 4B. A lot of these women are coming forward and they're like, yes, this is empowering. We're going to totally reject marriage and childbearing and having kids because it's so modern. It's so forward thinking. And then at the same time, there's this movement called Boy Sober, which I read briefly in another excerpt from the New York Times article. This is another trend on TikTok where women are taking a break. They're abstaining from dating men. And this isn't because they are saving themselves for marriage or they're trying to date more consciously. They're just giving up on men because they hate men. And they say that this is part of their self-care and their personal growth. You can find plenty of TikToks of these young, beautiful women who say that they're boy sober and they're going to go to therapy and they're going to take care of themselves. And it's not just a temporary detox, but it's something much more than that. It's a cultural revolution. So what's going on here? You combine all the sexless marriages. I just think that story that was shared from the New York Times in the beginning of the article, this husband and wife, they have a child and they masturbate separately. They have like separate masturbation schedules. No, did you notice how the husband was addicted to corn? He watches corn every night to reach a certain amount of pleasure. Well, his real wife he has a wife who is alive and lives in the same home as he does, the mother of his child, and they're not even having sex. And then later in the article, I think I saw another screenshot. The couple was talking about how she had the wife, Michelle, had a bit of a traumatic birth and she did not feel like having sex for a whole year after giving birth. That's a long time. Look, I'm not going to pretend to know. I don't know what it's like to have a birth that is so traumatic that you don't want to be touched for a year. I'm not even going to try to I'm not going to make fun of that. Maybe something horrible did happen and she just didn't feel like anyone touching her down there for a year. Okay. That's unfortunate. That's really sad. But after they had sex for the first time, after a year, they only have sex like every few months, every 6 months, maybe. And they just both stick to this personal masturbation schedule. And this is like one of the couples that is being interviewed for this New York Times article. That is so sad. That is such a disconnected, dystopian way to approach intimacy with your partner. I mean, that's not even intimacy. That's like, it's just so sterile. Like your husband is watching porn every night and you're fine with that because you're just going to masturbate in the morning. It makes me feel nauseous. And a huge part of this is the normalization of porn. We think that it's totally normal to take out your phone, take out your laptop, and watch other people be intimate. On a regular basis, you're going to watch it every day. No wonder you guys aren't having sex. No wonder you're not being intimate with your wife, because you're watching other people do it all the time online. It makes me sick to my stomach to think about. A sexless marriage is not something that should be glorified. You know, every couple will, of course, naturally go through these phases where they probably have less sex than usual, whether it's because of, you know, the woman recently gave birth, or, you know, maybe you're going through a rough patch in your marriage, because sex is often a reflection of the connection that you have with one another. Maybe one of you is going through a period of grief because you lost somebody that you love. There are always going to be times here and there where you have a little bit less sex. Okay. But to completely wash your hands of sex and to pretend like it's normal to not have these physically intimate moments with your partner. I'm sorry, I hate that word. Why did I say partner? I always hate when people say partner. It's because I was reading these stupid excerpts. To not have these physically intimate moments with your husband or your wife, it's not okay to pretend like that's normal. Okay. Unfortunately, it's more common than we realize. Professionals define a sexless marriage as a couple that engages in sexual activities fewer than 10 times a year. So that's less than once a month. Or another definition of a sexless marriage is if a year has passed without sexual intimacy. And according to a 2018 study, over 15% of married Americans report no sexual activity in the last year, with 13.5% not having sex for the past 5 years. Oh my gosh. That is so sad. The prevalence of sexless marriages can be attributed to a lot of different things, but before we even talk about what the reasons of sexless marriages are, you have to be okay with admitting that it's nothing good can come out of it. Okay. Nothing good can come out of not having a physically intimate relationship with your husband or your wife. The absence of sexual intimacy can diminish the distinctiveness of a marital relationship, and it reduces it to something more like deep friendship or a roommate situation, neither of which are good for the husband and wife, because marriage is so much deeper than that. And this is problematic because men usually generally have higher sexual needs, but women also need to feel connected to their husband, and a way to do that is to be physically intimate. And having the regular sexual connection with your husband or wife is essential, not only for your own fulfillment, but for the health and vitality of the marriage itself. And I actually think that this intentional shift towards celebrating sexless marriages it's on purpose, because it's just another way to lead people into despair and loneliness and isolation. Remember, the more isolated you are and the more lonely and unhealthy you are, yes, mentally, the more easily you are programmed to believe whatever the government wants you to believe, whatever mainstream society wants you to believe. You're more susceptible to brainwashing. You're more accepting of extreme politics that are rooted in leftist feminist ideology. Just like women have been convinced previously to buy into hookup culture and abortion and body positivity and significantly delaying or rejecting marriage and motherhood, they're now being convinced to settle for sexless marriages as if it's going to benefit them. It's just another chapter in the upside down that makes no sense. But to the mainstream machines in power, it's perfect and it works out great, because it just makes women lonelier, men too, men and women lonelier and more susceptible to the influence of the mainstream culture. And the unhappier we are, the more easily we are manipulated and coerced and controlled. So it makes perfect sense to me that they would try to promote sexless marriages. I mean, again, it is the upside down. How long have they been doing this to us? They've been telling us that bad things are good for you. Hey, hook up with whoever you want. It's really good for you. It's going to make you feel empowered and sexy. Hey, abort your baby because it's going to make you successful in your career. Hey, embrace body positivity and be obese because it's going to make you really happy. You're going to feel really confident. And now it's, hey, accept a marriage where your husband watches porn every night and you don't have sex, because that's empowering for you as a woman to find out what really pleases you. It's the upside down. They keep giving us one thing after the other that is obviously so bad for you, and they try to paint it as this thing that's going to liberate you and it's going to be empowering for you and your husband. It's so stupid. It honestly makes me so sad too, because you think about like a couple of reasons why so many couples are sexless. We have to go back to corn, the prevalence of corn. It ruins the wiring of your brain. It ruins your dopamine centers. It ruins your ability to be intimate with another human being in person. It's a major disconnector, just like we talked about that couple, Michelle and John. Like, they are majorly disconnected because the husband is addicted to corn. And it doesn't matter if it's the man or the woman or both people who are addicted to this depraved thing, but it's causing a rift in a lot of marriages. I see a lot of, quite a few Orthodox priests who have done content online lately. Father Josiah Trenum is the last one that I watched, where he talked about, he counsels a lot of couples and he hears a lot of confessions where a husband or a wife are addicted to corn, and it is a major disruptor of the marriage. And it just eats away at the foundation of a healthy marriage. And unfortunately, more and more people are becoming addicted to it because it's so readily available. And I'm so sick and tired of people arguing about whether corn should be made illegal. Obviously, it should be illegal. What are you talking about? How could you possibly think that it should? Oh, because two consenting adults can do whatever they want. And if the adults consent to it, and if people consent to watching it, then it's the free market. Consent-based morality is a cancer to our society. Just because you consent to it doesn't mean it's right. No, there is objective morality that should be observed and should be adhered to, but it's not in today's upside down society. So yeah, corn should be illegal. But then there's also the factor, another reason why so many marriages are just sexless is because people are just less sexy and less attractive than they ever were before. People are more obese, they're more overweight, they're unhealthy. More people are just docile and not driven, not ambitious. And coming from the woman's perspective, like, it's really unattractive to have a husband who's just not driven, not ambitious. And also unattractive to have a husband who's just like overweight and pudgy and doesn't really care what he looks like, and vice versa. It's not exciting for a husband to have a wife who is 30 pounds overweight and she's not very attractive. She doesn't try anymore, doesn't make herself look pretty when you come home. Like, we're just seeing these people who were just less attractive than they were before. Every time I see some Twitter account share videos from the 1970s or 1980s, I'll always remember, I don't know what city it was in, but they showed footage of some Star Wars movie premiere in the 70s. And all the people in the movie theater's packed. And everyone is coming in, they're buying tickets and popcorn. They're all thin, they're cute. And these are the nerds who are into Star Wars. They're thin, they're sociable, they're talking, they're happy, they're smiling. And they're, eating popcorn and having a great time. And they're being interviewed, and they seem to have great social skills, and they're very engaging. And then you see a lot of footage from like the 1980s, people on the beach. Everyone looked hot. And now you look at people on the beach, you look at people at the grocery store, and in most places in the United States, they're just unattractive. You guys may follow AJAC, Alexander J. Cortez. He came on my podcast when I was doing that podcast with my friend Mike, and he's a fitness trainer. He's got a really big following, but he also talks a lot about culture and men's issues and stuff. And he has this phrase that is so true. He talks about, and I don't usually use this word on my show, but I'm going to just repeat what he says. He says, we need to increase the fuck rate. That's what he says. He says, we need to increase the fuck rate because people are not, pardon me, but they're not fuckable anymore. Like, you see a lot of these young women, even young men, whether you're single or you're in a relationship or married, they're just not attractive. Because people are so unhealthy. They're pumping their body with nasty food and endocrine disruptors and toxins. And of course, it's going to affect the way that you look. It's going to affect a woman's figure. It's going to affect what her skin looks like, how vibrant her cheeks are, how red her cheeks are, what her hair looks like. It's going to affect everything. It's going to affect men's bellies. Like, a lot of these men have these beer bellies because they don't exercise and these like dad bods, and They just drink beer and they don't care about their health. Like almost everyone's unattractive now. And so Ajax talks about on his Twitter, he's like, we need to increase the fuck rate. If you want to increase the birth replacement rate, make people sexier, make people more attractive, make women more beautiful. And that's one of the reasons why the rates of men and women having sex, even in a marriage, are so much lower, because people aren't attractive anymore. I don't say that to be mean. I'm not saying that you're worth any less if you're struggling with your weight or if you don't really take care of yourself. I'm just saying that we all have a duty to look our best. And then you see these colorized videos from like the 1930s and 40s of everyone walking around New York City. The way that people dressed, the top hats and the three-piece suits and the women with the beautiful dresses, and they took so much pride in the way that they were dressed. I recently rewatched the movie The Help, which I know you're not allowed to like because it's supposed to be very racist or whatever. But I always thought that movie was really cute. And, you know, the 1950s, you see all these women, they just dress really beautifully. They have the beautiful silhouettes of the hourglass shaped dresses, and they do their hair, and they took so much pride in the way they looked. The same with men. And today, go to the grocery store, most women go in their like bra and underwear and sweatpants and sliders, and we just don't look nice in Western American culture. And this is one of those practical tips. If we want to maintain the physical intimacy in our marriage, and if we want our husband to continue to be attracted to us, it's important to remain beautiful and sexy in your own way. Now, when I say sexy, I don't mean you have to look like Sydney Sweeney 24/7. I don't mean you have to go get a boob job and look like J-Lo or Ana de Armas. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that you just have to enhance your own beauty and make an effort to look good. Dress nicely, exercise regularly so that you're at a healthy weight. Obviously, there are going to be times as a mom and a wife when you're a little bit bigger than usual, like when you're pregnant, like 9 months pregnant like me. After I have my baby, it's going to be a couple months before I get back to my normal pre-pregnancy size. Yeah, I'm not talking about those phases of life, but every woman can take care of herself to make herself look nice for her husband. And this is a very, very important thing that I think a lot of women are missing out on, because, you know, I will admit it's hard. Sometimes if you're a stay-at-home mom, like I'm home all day, my husband comes home. There are plenty of days where he comes home and I'm totally disheveled. I haven't washed my hair. I'm like in a sort of stained just day gown, day dress, whatever. And I just don't look very nice. And I don't feel great when my husband comes home to that. We can put in a little bit more effort to look nice for our husband. And I can't stand, people get offended by this, but it's a good thing to put an effort for your husband. You don't need to go full glam with your makeup and dye your hair, but it's just in a reasonable sense, look good for your husband. Be feminine, be attractive. And that in and of itself keeps the sex alive in the marriage. And then same for men. Don't get fat. Don't get complacent. A woman doesn't need you to have a six-pack to be attracted to you. I think there's a misconception out there that women need you to be totally shredded in order to be attracted to you. No, we just need you to have a little bit of muscle, just work out regularly, be confident, be driven, be funny, flirt with your husband, flirt with your wife. There are so many things that you can do to just keep that intimacy alive and keep the attraction alive in a marriage. And that in and of itself will cure this problem of sexless marriages. So we should not be normalizing sexless marriages, okay? Like I said, of course, there are going to be phases of life where you're going to have a little bit less sex than usual, but that phase should not last for like 2 years. So look good for your husband or wife. And keep the sex alive and don't watch corn. Do not watch corn, guys. Seriously. I mean, men and women, doesn't matter what gender, don't watch corn. It's really unfortunate how much it's taken over our society and resulted in the destruction of relationships, the destruction of marriage. Andrew Huberman did an episode on corn a long time ago, maybe just a year or two ago. Talked about how it makes men more docile. It makes them the complete opposite of driven and ambitious. And because it rewires your brain, ruins your dopamine centers. And it's just a terrible, nasty addiction that I don't think there's enough support for. So if you are struggling with addiction to corn, I hope that you do find the help, because it's not good for you. Even if you're single, it's not good for you or your wife or your husband or whatever it is. So that's all I got for today, guys. Let me know what you think in the comments section about this glorification of sexless marriages. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to my channel, please. Share the video with somebody if you liked it, and even if you didn't like it. And let me know if there are any topics that you want me to cover in the next few episodes. Okay, we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.